this is Peter Deppe. He's a really interesting guy. He founded Commute, and he's been really great to talk to so far. I think you guys will find what he has to say really interesting. So, Peter, thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I guess a little bit of background about myself and my co-founder, Scott. We started we started Commute in November of 2018. And our whole mission is to become the universal charging infrastructure for micromobility. And micromobility is, just as you can see in the picture behind me, anything from bikes to scooters to wheelchairs to skateboards to even like cargo bikes and delivery robots. So we're able to park and charge pretty much anything smaller than a car.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I understand. Like, I basically want to start this off by walking a little bit through like the background of starting the company, and then hopefully touch on some like the technical design process of it as well. I think would be really interesting to hear about. And so I am wondering, first off, what is your technical background? Like, where did you start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess experience and background, always plays a pretty critical role into building a business. My background specifically is in both mechanical and electrical engineering. I actually started off as a mechanical engineer, and then halfway through transferred to Kettering and changed my major at the same time. My co-founder, Scott, his background is in computer science, computer engineering. So, having all of these different sort of expertise, or as much expertise you can right out of college, and bringing it all together with these different aspects of different, I guess, legs of the stool of engineering, whether it's, mechanical or electrical or it's software. At least, we've been able to do most of it in-house, which has been pretty great. But I guess more about Commute and how we started, I guess going way back. I met with a mentor pretty much on the regular every week. So every week I would drive to his house, and he was a coworker of my dad, and my father works for General Motors. So his colleague was in sort of the innovation space within GM. So I would go there, meet with him, and we would, it was basically like we were studying entrepreneurship, because at the time I was just still in school, didn't really know much. I mean, I knew, I watched Shark Tank all the time, and I knew I wanted to do something similar. I just had really no idea where to start, or how to even look at entrepreneurship and kind of pick a path, because there's unlimited paths. So really the main theme I learned from him is when you're choosing a problem to solve, starting a business is hard enough. So you want to try to figure out what your unfair advantage is. So for us, we figured, hey, we're in Michigan, we should probably do something with mobility, because we have enough talent in the area with all the really great universities here. You got suppliers in the automotive space. You have basically the automotive industry, living here as well. So all of these things, could really help in building a mobility focused business. If we were to get to the point where, we were able to hire and bring people on and stuff like that. And I mean, now we have, but at the early stages, it was more theorizing. How do we set ourselves up for the best chance of success? So that's, what we thought. And, at that time, I was just looking for problems to solve in mobility. And, at the time, electric scooters were just starting to pop up all over the world. And pretty much every newspaper and online article said, it's a huge mess. They're expensive to charge. The cities hate them. They're like really dangerous, all of these negative things. So I figured, hey, we could probably solve some kind of problem within what's called micromobility. So the e-scooters, and then the buzzwords of, the first and last mile is what it's called, of transportation. So I guess with that insight, we were sort of looking for ideas to solve now, like how do we solve this problem? So in the beginning, it's just been kind of, uh, I don't know, kind of, picking an idea, um, and, really narrowing down on features and trying to really, um, figure out which ones are nice to have and which ones are really necessary to have.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the, I guess, overlying theme, ever since we built our first prototype. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I want to go back to like when you were basically learning and studying entrepreneurship. Um, at that time, I know that you wanted to start an idea, but like, what were some of the things that were helping you to narrow down the ideas um, that you were doing? So, like, you spent a lot of time. You probably drafted like a million ideas. What were some of the things that you eliminated, or how you even like thought to eliminate them?
Yeah. So, I guess in the beginning of Commute, before it even had a name,
Mhm.
we had this idea of this giant sort of station, that had all of these features of being able to like, use AI, have like these automated vending machines, have bikes parked in it, have solar on the top, have, a bunch of other random things that, you know, sounds really cool and they might solve a problem, but, starting off and starting to build hardware, you really need to focus on one or two things because there's enough problems that stem out of building something, entirely from the ground up.
Mhm.
So it always makes sense to really focus on, for us, it's locking and charging what we're focusing on. And anything else is something, that can be added later, but is more of a distraction now to get the best quality product built, efficiently and at a good cost,
Mhm.
rather than having, a hub that would cost like tens of thousands of dollars. We're doing it for, a fraction of that. So it's been, um, you know, obviously another thing that's really interesting is, when you look at a market, you should always, um, try to gauge it and understand what the optimal price point is, and then design a product with that price in mind. Most people actually do it in reverse, where they design a product and then they try to meet that goal of trying to, cram it into a certain price, and then now they have no margin, and then you can't run a business.
Mhm.
So it always makes sense for us. We knew sort of a rough price point of what we wanted to charge,
Mhm.
and then we kind of built the hardware around that. Because I mean, we could build a hub that costs $1 million, and but no one would buy it. So
Oh yeah.
it doesn't do you much good. So you have to have the price in mind ahead of time, before you actually start building it, so you know that you can actually eventually start selling product, and it's not just, you're asking for $1 million product where, the budget these people have are maybe a few $1,000s. So,
Mhm.
that's always something that I found was pretty helpful, when I learned. And I mean, sometimes it's just easily overlooked. I didn't really understand that before, but after hearing it, it makes
Mhm.
perfect sense. So yeah, that's a little bit how we really narrowed down features and also tried to pick price points.
Yeah, I remember you were talking about how you were waiting to advertise while you were designing it, and like waiting to talk to people about it, just to give like that added flexibility of being able to like alter things while it was still being designed.
Mhm.
And I thought that was interesting. That kind of relates here. Like, at what was it a particular moment in time where you knew that you were going to start this company, or like you had the idea and you're just like, let's go?
So I guess, I didn't really exactly know when it would turn into a real company. I mean, in the beginning, it was just kind of, let's just have an idea, try to build a few prototypes and see what happens. So we actually had, both Scott and myself actually had this as, or we made it our, undergraduate thesis project at Kettering, where we both graduated from. So I actually did mine on the business model and how we were going to structure it strategically. And then Scott actually did a lot of the back end software for his thesis.
Mhm.
Uh, so, we were able to leverage, using school projects and school resources, as well. And, it was really interesting to tie it in. And then me having an engineering background and then doing a thesis on the business side was, pretty eye-opening as well, because I really don't have any business background besides, reading some books and lots of YouTube videos. So, um, you know, kind of duct tape all that together, and eventually I was able to put together sort of this business proposal, business plan binder that had many different sides to it, where it talked about sort of the market landscape, the different competitors, any IP that we needed to be aware of that could potentially hurt our chances of launching a product, and then also the viability long term of launching this kind of product. So, and even since then, the outcomes have changed quite a bit. Our customers are slightly different than I originally thought. So it's been, you think you have the solution in the beginning, then a few months or even weeks later, you're like, oh wow, there's a much better option out there.
Right. I remember you talked about, like, during this period of time, especially in testing for viability, this company 100K Ideas that you were working for. And I'm wondering, like, well, first of all, for the people that don't know, what is 100K Ideas? And then secondly, like, what are some of the things that that you would basically look at about a company or a product while you were checking its viability?
Yeah. I guess even backing up, I'll talk a little bit more about 100K Ideas. So I guess even backing up a little further for some context. So at Kettering, you have to do co-ops, or basically internships, every other 3 months. So you go to internship school. I was interning at a few different automotive suppliers, sort of bouncing around. I didn't really enjoy the sort of typical engineering job. So I quit from a few positions. I was basically let go / quit on the final one because it just wasn't for me. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, and then ironically, there was this idea accelerator that launched in Flint called 100K Ideas, and I guess about them, they're really sort of an idea accelerator or idea sort of validation tool to help people with, basically, you can have a picture drawn on a napkin, and you can go in there and they can help you at least get started, see if this is a good idea, things like that. So yeah, my next co-op or internship was I was an electrical engineer / project manager at 100K Ideas. I was there for about 1.5 years, I believe. So I would help people, start their ideas. I would help them prototype their ideas, and sort of get off the ground from ground zero to, just above ground on the idea. So it's a really cool program. And if anyone out there is interested, I believe it's just 100kideas.org is their website. I could be wrong. I haven't gone there in a while, to be honest. So, but I'm pretty sure that's their website, or just search 100K, so 100K Ideas Flint, and it'll most likely pop up. But yeah, it was really cool program, and really, I would say that was a really big step in building Commute. So I brought Commute, or Scott and I brought Commute through the program. That's actually how we created the business binder for it. Those are just binders that they do for every client. So I just basically did my own as my own project manager. So got to use some work time, I guess, for Commute. And we brought it through the program. Had some really good insights, but mainly I think the biggest thing for us is just the network that we've grown through 100K. That's how we've gotten all of our investors, a lot of different grant funding opportunities. It's just been, and then a lot of really good mentors as well. And that's a really big piece for starting a business. You need to have really good mentors, so that way, you can at least miss some of the hurdles that they went through, as opposed to stumbling every step of the way. So that's been also a huge help. But yeah, that's a little bit about 100K. And yeah, I encourage anyone, if you have an idea, definitely reach out. They're a great group of people. It's interesting because most of the workforce or the staff there are college students. So it's very, the whole goal there is to be non-intimidating. I mean, they're not dressed all in suits and, buttoned up with ties and all that. They're all just, regular college students with really different backgrounds, whether it's engineering, graphic design, business, finance, all there to help. So it's a really cool program.
And what does that cost to start going there? Do you just show up and say, "Hey, I want some help"?
Yeah, so you go there, and then if you want to do a binder, trying to remember the cost offhand. I believe it's $200 for a binder, and it takes a few weeks to compile all that information.
Mm.
It's really comprehensive and thorough. Definitely worth it. They also have scholarships available on the binder. I believe last time I checked, and you can go there and they can really help you on a lot of different ways. And they also help with next steps after the binder for prototyping ideas and helping you with that. So really cool. And they also make logos and other things like that. So really cool system they have going there.
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, I just want to talk about like what designing the actual hub was like for you. I know, like, I guess from like the first design up, what did that look like, and
Yeah.
how?
Yeah. So going back to the first design, like I mentioned, it was sort of this little hut thing with solar panels on top and an area for bike parking that eventually became scooter parking.
Mm-hmm.
But we actually built this prototype, and it was more of a form, or not form, a function, or didn't even function. It was more of just to get the general shape of the idea in a physical thing you could touch. So we bought solar panels, we bought doors from Home Depot, we bought some PVC pipe, and we built this hut outdoors. And then we have this PVC pipe thing coming out at the side that angled down. With the PVC pipe thing kind of resembled the hub that does now, so in the picture behind me. And after building that, we realized this is not going to work. It's huge. It's not going to fit on a sidewalk if this thing's on a sidewalk, and it's just going to take up way too much real estate in the public right of way. So we figured, okay, this definitely needs to change, and this is really how we started scaling back all of these different features, and it really helped in our long-term success of actually building something. Less features is less complicated because, as everyone knows, you think it's going to take one time, and it's going to take 3 times that to actually build something, as we found out. So yeah, it looked like a hut with like this weird thing coming out the side for bike and scooter parking. And then we like I said, we figured out, nah, it's not going to work. And then we figured, okay, how about they attach to a light post on one side and then angle off and then down. And then we ran into the issue of here in Flint, no one knew who owned the light posts. And then we were like, okay, this is an interesting dilemma.
Yeah.
So I guess we're going to scrap the light post idea, even though it would have been cool to use existing infrastructure and then just kind of tap off it for power. It would have been really efficient and an interesting way to fit into a city with minimal additions. But then we figured, light post idea probably not the best way forward, because if it's happening here, it might be happening elsewhere. So then we decided, okay, we're just going to build this PVC pipe thing that has 2 legs and a horizontal beam in the middle. And you can see how well now we're getting closer to the final version of the hub. So we built this PVC hub. We bought a cheap Amazon scooter so that this system could all, at the time it only locked. There was no charging yet. So it just used solenoid locks and a bunch of 3D printed parts, PVC, duct tape, hot glue, and some really poorly soldered proto board with some really weird circuits on it to open the locks and stuff. And that was pretty much what it was. And we would I would bring it into 100K Ideas, show people, try to get some feedback. And at the time it was basically, there's even a camera on it, so that way you could use the camera to scan a QR code that's on your phone screen. And then we ran into some issues there, so we scrapped that. And then we figured, let's get rid of the camera. Most of these vehicles have QR codes anyway. And then eventually, you only scan the QR code and it unlocks everything at the same time. So
Mm.
That's, I guess, jumping ahead a little bit. Um, then, after we built the PVC sort of pipe version, we went to the Kettering Entrepreneurship Society, which both actually where I met Scott.
Mm.
He was pretty regularly going there, and I transferred there and started going because I thought it was a pretty cool club. And we brought this prototype there, and we pitched, we got some grant funding, and then we ordered the first steel version, which is really pretty much, I would say, we're about 80% there to what you see now behind me in the picture.
Mm.
Uh, so this steel version was still broken up into sections because we wanted it to be extremely modular, and then we eventually decided it was almost too modular. Um,
Mhm.
so it was basically a little one port. So each parking spot is called a port on our hub.
Yep.
Each port had its own little section, and then it had this collar that sort of combined it to make the longer tube, and then
Mm.
it had the legs. Um, so, we ordered it, and it was kind of a weird feeling actually getting to that part where you actually have a steel hub
Mm.
that was fabricated by professionals. And like I told you earlier, we had that we set up the hub, and I'm pretty sure Scott and I sat there in my college apartment just staring at it for an hour because we were just like, wow, this is something we designed, and it's just kind of hanging out in front of us in my apartment living room.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's a whole set of stories of us sanding steel in front of my apartment, and running a 3D printing farm out of my apartment, and using about 5 times the average power consumption of the apartment complex. So won't get into that, but fun times. We'll gloss over that in case the apartment complex hears this. Uh, so, but yeah, we got to the steel part, and then obviously you gotta paint the thing. So we figured out powder coating. There's some local powder coating people nearby, so we got it powder coated. Um, so yeah, we just built up the shell, looked cool, and then now it was time to put the electronics in it. So one day, we're up all night trying to get this thing built, and so that way we can leave for a pitch competition the next day. So
Mm.
it's been the whole process of building this thing is definitely a process in itself. Going from really early, made out of doors from Home Depot and PVC pipe to just PVC pipe, getting
Mm.
the form, or sort of the form factor down, and then actually moving to sort of final material selection, and then we've even made tweaks there to moving to aluminum over steel because of different rust issues with sea salt and road salt during the winter.
Mm.
So there's even things that we're still doing now where we're making material changes because there's things that we just don't think about, and it might rust prematurely or wear not consistently. So
Mm.
yeah, there's always little minor tweaks here and there.
Yeah, I was actually I had a comment on that design side. Designing hardware is pretty intense because like I do software, and that's you can write it and you can iterate pretty quickly, and like hardware is it definitely takes a lot more of like sourcing things. Um, like what was it like to get like that first steel prototype made?
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I this might be like a quick answer, but like how did you contact that company and have like your first real proper uh, hub manufactured?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, so we actually got in touch with them through a mutual connection through the Kettering Entrepreneurship Society.
Mhm.
Um, so it was really easy to just be like, okay, we know them in a way.
Mhm.
I just sent them the sort of CAD drawings that I drew up, and they just fabricated it for us, and we just went there and picked it up.
Mhm.
But even before that, there's different people. So I guess touching on hardware,
Mhm.
um, it's called hardware because it's hard and expensive. Is the joke around here. So having sort of a background or a hobby of 3D printing for both Scott and myself has been super helpful on the hardware side of being able to iterate pretty fast and pretty cheap. 3D printers have actually come down in price. You can get some pretty decent hobbyist, not really professional grade, but pro hobbyist models for, $1,000 or so.
Yeah.
Uh, and then you can, in a few hours have parts made by just printing it, which is really cool, that you can do that out of your apartment. Or now we have like a farm of, 12 of them. And we also have some industrial 3D printers coming, to where we can, step our game up a little bit. But, 3D printing has been really helpful in allowing us to make enclosures on the inside, some different things where, otherwise you'd have to go to injection molding, and, buying a mold is like $50,000. And when, I'm still just like struggling to pay for lunch for during college, it's like, $50,000 is not on the table.
Yeah.
And then, you got to rent time on an injection molding machine, and you got to do minimum order quantities. And it's just like, injection molding doesn't really seem like a likely, stage or option for any early stage company, unless you went out and raised like a few $1,000,000. But, we weren't anywhere near that, whatsoever at the time. So yeah, 3D printing, helped us really get pretty far. And then, having those connections through the Entrepreneurship Society, was huge. And then, like I said, getting a little bit of funding to, take that leap and build a steel version, was really helpful, because then we were able to now take that steel version and go to pitch competitions, which we'll talk about. I know you have some questions on that we can share, where, it really helped us, solidify ourselves as someone that can actually build something, tangible, rather than, it'd be okay showing up with a PVC version because it shows you've built something, which is better than showing up with nothing. But, having a sort of more polished version always looks better, to like investors, for example. So yeah, I guess that's I don't know if it answers the question directly, but there's some good background there on, how we felt, going through the process, and some different hobbies that actually help play a pretty interesting role, in allowing us to, pretty inexpensively get up off the ground.
Yeah, definitely. And then actually, yeah, I would like to touch on the pitch competition and just general like fundraising for this company. Um, Obviously, it takes some money to do all of these things. So yeah, what was like sourcing that like?
Yeah. So, in the beginning, like I said, we had some early grant funding through the Kettering Entrepreneurship Society.
Mhm.
And then, I guess one interesting little story, when we actually bought a fleet of e-scooters and launched our own shared ride share here in Flint, more as a test fleet, and to bring, micromobility here to Flint.
Mhm.
And, when it came time to pay the deposit, two college students don't exactly have like $10,000 laying around. So, we had a call on Friday night, and we needed $10,000 by Friday to get the scooters here in time. So, the next day, um, I mean, I think I just started a semester, so I had some fresh loan money from school. So, threw a few $1,000 at it, and then, the rest of the semester was pretty much me living off of ramen noodles, but that's fine. And then, went around our co-working space at the Ferris wheel, which is a really cool co-working space, which is actually where 100K Ideas is on the first floor of.
Mhm.
And we just kind of, I walked the halls of the Ferris wheel, asking for, people to loan us some money.
No way.
And, pulling through with a few of the really generous people there, as well as, my sister. We were able to come up with $10,000, and, don't worry, I paid them all back on time, so we're good there.
Mhm.
And, it was, a really stressful few days.
Yeah,
Trying to go from 0 to $10,000, when
it was
I
a time
probably had
crunch, right?
not much in my account.
It,
So
it was the time crunch, right?
yeah, with a few days. I guess there's, um, I guess another saying, if you wait till the last minute, it only takes a minute to do. Maybe that doesn't apply to everything, but, maybe in this case it helped, put a little fire under us. But yeah, so, we were able to at least pull some funding together for the deposit, and that wasn't even the whole order. But, eventually, Like I said, we were able to get some grant funding, also through 100K Ideas. They had this grant through the Michigan Energy Office for sort of green energy ideas looking to get off the ground. So we were able to leverage some funding there to purchase 40 hubs for Flint, so we can outfit Flint.
Mm.
So we did that, and then having that momentum going. Sort of talking about that pitch competition earlier. We were wrapping up. We basically were up all night building a hub that could slightly work in some ways to at least show some potential. And then we drove out to Youngstown, Ohio for the Comeback Capital Bowl,
Mm.
hosted by Comeback Capital. And even, I guess, backing up, that pitch competition we applied for, and we originally weren't even on the top 5 to pitch, and then some I think the stars aligned somehow, and some companies maybe dropped out, and we were on the list somehow, some way, a week before the competition. And having an investor call me saying that, and then realizing, I've never pitched in my entire life, and now I'm going to go pitch in front of 300 of the most powerful investors in the U.S. and maybe the world. That's a big jump from just
Wow.
pitching this to a few friends to real time. Here we go, like the Super Bowl. So basically, so we get down there on time. I load up my car with a scooter and part of the hub to show it off at the thing. We drive down to Youngstown, drop things off at the hotel, go to this dinner. Next day, it's showtime. So there's both me and Scott showing up to this conference with a scooter and like half a hub, dragging it through this like huge auditorium sort of thing. And we were the weird people with these weird prototypes just walking around, and then we just set it up in a corner and just kind of hung out there. Had people kind of just walk up to us like a booth. Probably wasn't meant to do that or supposed to do that or even allowed, but then again, no one told us no, so we did it. So yeah, we get there, we pitch. This is me pitching for the first time. I prepared by studying my note cards, and then you get up there under stress and you forget your note cards. And I accidentally swore on stage twice because I forgot. That was totally on accident because I was pretty upset with myself. But maybe it showed them that I'm human and I have flaws, and which I have plenty of them. And they saw something in me and Scott, and we were able to, or fortunately, place second place and had a really nice $75K check written for us from Comeback Capital and Right Side Capital Management. And that was really the first serious round of funding that we brought on. And when someone writes you a check, especially as an investment, and now they own part of your company too, that's really when it becomes real. And sort of at that point is when, we always knew we wanted to do this full time and really dedicate our time to this 100%. If you ask my professors, I definitely dedicated 100% because I didn't really show up to class, but don't do that. Don't do that at all. No, go to class. Be respectful that way. But yeah, it's a whole new meaning when someone writes you a check and hands it to you and is like, here you go. You're worth this much now. This is what we value your company. Here's your check. We now own X% of your company. We'll help you out with our network, which is a really interesting thing I didn't really know about. Investors will actually help reach out to other investors or part of their network, whether it's customers, investors, mentors, whoever, which is really awesome. And I didn't realize once you bring them onto your team, they're basically, they want to work for you in some capacity because they gave you money and they want their investment to grow. So it's kind of an interesting relationship that I didn't really understand until it happened, which is really cool. So yeah, we were able to do that. We were lucky enough, like I said, to get into this competition, walk away with some money. And then, things really started rolling. We were able to purchase the rest of our 40 scooters, showed up, and then we launched sort of our test rideshare in Flint. It really helped us experiment, try different things. and really have some good marketing data for our customers, which are cities and what they're called ride shares or mobility service providers, where they essentially have a shared fleet of some kind of vehicle for rent.
Right.
So
Business model would be pretty interesting to touch on. I
yeah,
think you mentioned it as two separate, well, two combined.
yeah,
Um, and that
yeah.
with like how you integrate with other uh, like micromobility services, right?
Mhm. Yeah. So I guess a little bit about our business model. So right now we're actually doing two separate business models at the same time, which might be confusing in some ways, but for us right now we're picking really two great options, sort of the best two, and testing them at the same time. That's what we see it as. I mean, as a startup, you're always experimenting,
Mm-hmm.
and you never want to put all of your eggs in one basket. So for us, we're doing a subscription or more of a SaaS model. So a subscription service where a rideshare can actually pay us a monthly subscription per vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
and we will go out. We will cover the cost of basically everything. We'll ship the hubs out. We'll install them. We'll own them. We'll operate, maintain them.
Mm-hmm.
It's still part of our network that we own, and they just simply have access to it, non-exclusive access to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, it's right now we're trying to treat it more as like a Tesla supercharging network and less of like those really specific niche sort of stations for like a traditional bike share where it only fits their bike.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to be more of like public infrastructure where we can park and charge just about anything rather than being a really, like I said, specific hardware to only one provider. Because if a city's buying it, which is our other business model,
Mm-hmm.
um, if that provider, if the rideshare comes in with their own hub and leaves, it's like now you have legacy infrastructure that doesn't work with anything else in your city, and it was a waste of the investment. But if a city buys infrastructure knowing that they can swap out vendors of ride shares or have different software integrate with it or delivery robots work with it or just about anything, it's a lot more enticing for them to actually put up money and spend the money to actually install this infrastructure because they know have a much larger lifespan and they'll have a better return on investment for the infrastructure, which is really key when trying to get city dollars on a product. So kind of interesting. So yeah, we have the subscription option for the rideshare, or we sell direct to cities, hotels, resorts, apartment complexes, co-working spaces, places or locations basically that we want to, or even restaurants that want to buy in to micromobility and provide charging and parking for both shared fleets and personally owned options as well.
Mm-hmm.
hmm Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't want to make you run through the pitch there.
Yeah. No worries.
It all the time, but yeah, it's interesting to hear. Um, and actually, I'm kind of wondering now, going back a little bit, like what are some tips that you have for pitching now that you've been doing pitches for a while? Like, say somebody else is going to start for their first time as well.
hmm
Like, how should they prepare? What are some things important to know
Yeah.
about their company?
So pitching is definitely some people are just really good at talking.
Mm,
I'm actually not. I'm more of an introvert. And, if you were to see me in high school, I'm the kid that goes up for, senior capstone and is about to pass out on stage.
mm,
That was me shaking, all the sweating, stumbling, basically. That was me. Uh, and it was me for some reason. But yeah, I guess uh, fast forwarding to my first pitch,
mm,
like I mentioned, I studied note cards and I tried to memorize those note cards, which was probably my first mistake. Um, I mean, going into it, you probably think, let me just memorize these note cards. I'll stick to the bullet points, got everything laid out, should be, done deal. But the problem is when you get up there on stage, you get really nervous and
mm,
forget everything on the note cards. So now I think really the best way to prepare um, for a pitch is literally just go have conversations about your company. And, the whole process of me, preparing for pitch competitions, speaking events, pretty much anything. Um, Honestly, and again, take this with a grain of salt. I don't actually prepare for these. The reason is because I talk about commute so much. It's all pretty much the same general theme and general points I hit.
Right.
It's just I might tweak it just slightly for a different crowd. If it's investors, obviously you have to talk about your financials, and then loop in momentum, traction, the future, what you're looking at doing,
Mm.
uh, the team. Obviously, you got to talk about the team because that's huge there for them. And then if you're talking to, maybe um, a class of like, eighth graders, for example. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about APIs and how our thing, jumps and can charge anything from 24 volts to 72 volts, and then can do, can distribute charging throughout the hub and all these fancy technical things.
Yeah.
Um, and then talk about like additive manufacturing and all that. Obviously, they don't care about 90% of that, so you got to keep it. Obviously, you got to tailor it a little bit and be like, and you got to talk about like scooters and bikes and how they're a really great form of transportation, and how we're like charging them and things like that. Or so, I mean, you gotta figure out how to tailor it for each pitch, if you will. Even though the pitch might be to investors, might be to a class, might be like this talk, for example, how it's kind of just talking about the different roadblocks and learning points that we've had along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the honestly, long story short, the TLDR of my pitching, I guess, career is just go out and talk about your business as much as possible every day, and you will become the best at pitching your business that you can possibly be. Obviously, there's other things you can do, like maybe talk with like some kind of like pitch coach to help with you know like moving your hands. I mean, you can't really see my hands, but I'm moving my hands, and the act of actually moving helps you be more fluid in speaking, which is something I also didn't realize. Like in high school, I pretty much stood up there, hands by my side, like a robot or a 2x4, just like standing here, which obviously doesn't look natural, but at the time you're just like standing there scared out of your mind. But now that actually I've been able to be more fluid and you can kind of see me move my hands, it actually helps me be less nervous in a way, as well as be more fluid and just continue the conversation easier, rather than, like I said, being a 2x4 up there that's just kind of stuck, which it does take some time to learn that. It took me forever because I was really stuck on being pretty stiff up there. So just keep working at it. But yeah, talk about your company and try to move around on stage, but not too much. There's a good balance there. Yeah, that's my sort of pitching tips and tricks.
I agree. It definitely looks more organic and makes you look more confident as you're moving your hands. And then I guess it's helpful to know that you just said that helps you actually like get things off of your head as well.
Mm-hmm.
And another question about like pitching specifically to investors. Like, are there some like common questions that you get asked about commute in particular, or like certain uh, what I guess like numbers or like statistics about the company?
Mm-hmm. So this really depends at kind of what stage you're at, but I guess you could generalize it to three things they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
It's always what have you done,
Mm-hmm.
what are you doing now, and what are you going to do in the future.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then also, well, I guess the bonus would be what problem are you solving, and you should say that first, because most people actually start pitching and they won't actually say what problem they're solving, and then the investor will be like, what am I listening to? Please, you're wasting my time. So you want to obviously get that out as soon as possible so you can get them on track and be like, okay, I see what you're doing. Because obviously they're really busy, and you don't want to waste your time, because then you'll be known as the startup that wastes people's time, and you don't want to be that. You don't want to be that person. So start off with the problem you're solving. Um, Hopefully show it with pictures, because pictures are always better than words. While I'm on this, if anyone's looking to make a pitch deck, search Guy Kawasaki 10 slides. And Guy Kawasaki is a former sort of chief evangelist of Apple, and he's a really big investor. And he has really interesting templates for pitch decks that I have pretty much tried to follow to a T, because they make perfect sense. You want basically all pictures. You want no text. If you do have text, you want it like as big as font as possible. You want a black background with white text, so you have maximum contrast, so that anyone in the audience can see it. All these different things. Great. I mean, it just happened that it also fit our sort of, I guess, marketing and theme, because I mean, our colors are black, white, and green, so it's easy to have a black background with white text, and then obviously green accents. I understand, in some cases that might not be everyone's sort of brand colors, but try to pick like a darker color with some really good text that stands out. Please don't do like red background with like yellow text, or like some weird combination where it's like your eyes are bleeding looking at the screen, because the investors again will be like, why am I looking at you? So you got to make sure the colors mesh well. You don't want to have some weird combination where everyone's just like freaking out over it. So yeah, go to Guy Kawasaki. He has some books too, which are really helpful. But you can look up the 10 slides template he has, and it's awesome.
Yeah, that's a really nice thing to hear. And I just wanted to mention that, we actually have like another presentation later today that might also be interesting to learn some more about pitching in particular, by Zhao Ma, who's actually like a VC investor. So yeah, that would be pretty interesting if you want to learn some more about that. And well, yeah, I think that's run through a lot of my questions, and I'd like to open the floor if anybody else has some questions that they'd like to ask Peter. He's obviously very well equipped to answer them. And
don't all jump at once.
I remember you had some like good book recommendations.
Yeah. So I guess going way back to when I was meeting with my mentor, some value proposition generation and business model design. I might have some of those words flipped, by the same author. Really interesting books for understanding different business models and how different, they were one day startups. Like, you might have heard of Amazon, Google, Apple. They used to be startups too,
Right.
and how they actually got started, and how they have different business models within their companies for different products. Definitely a really good series of books. I think they have a third one too. I actually just saw on Amazon. That's about testing your product and how to receive feedback. Really good books. Another one is The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, I believe.
Yeah, sure.
And then, I mean, there's just a bunch of others. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a really good book. The Founder's Dilemma, extremely helpful, because it goes through a million different scenarios on how to deal with, starting a business with a friend, starting a business with a family member, starting a business on your own, starting a business with a stranger, bringing on investors, how to deal with investors, and the million other scenarios that happen or could potentially happen, how to hire, how to fire, pretty much everything in between. Really helpful book. And that book was called The Founder's Dilemma. I forget who it's by off the top of my head, but really helpful. And there's a million other books that I've read that are just, really interesting, that I unfortunately can't think off the top of my head right now. So
Oh, I mean, you had a lot of titles there. I was impressed with the number. Looks like we got a couple questions.
Awesome.
So let's see, like, how were you able to sell your product before it was actually manufactured from a hardware standpoint? Um,
So sell as in like pitch and kind of get people to invest, or as because we actually didn't start selling
mhm,
until after we raised that first pitch competition, or the pitch competition. We
mhm,
didn't make our first sort of sale outside of our shared fleet, which people rent, but outside of it for our actual hub until December of 2019.
mhm,
So, and that was out in New Jersey. And that's a whole nother story in itself of us driving 10 hours on basically Christmas, setting up the hub in 4 hours, and then driving 10 hours back. It was a nightmare. Um,
gosh.
oh, pitch to investors slash cities. Gotcha. Um, so one thing I say, if you have hardware, the best thing you can do is bring a prototype and set it on stage. Honestly, we were the only people to bring a prototype. I mean, I think the others were all software, so it's obviously you can just put images on or screenshots on the screen or somehow demo it.
Mhm,
But for us, I literally, like I said, we brought a hub, I put it in the center of the stage, I put a scooter next to it. Um, and honestly, even with me fumbling through, missing slides, um, honestly, I think the biggest thing going for us was we had something tangible that we built that they could literally that day touch and feel
mhm,
after the presentation or before the presentation. They knew who we were because we were the dudes in the corner talking to people as they walked up to us.
mhm,
Definitely having a physical product is essential no matter what stage it's at. I mean, if it was just the PVC pipes, we would have brought the PVC pipes to the stage, and it wouldn't have looked perfect, but at least we had something. And really, for most sort of pre-seed investors, that's all they really care about is having um, that confidence that you've actually done something, rather than you just having some images on the screen saying, "Oh, this is what we're going to build." We can actually say, "This is what we built." So that's yeah,
right.
that's I think the
Stu,
best way to pitch.
you mentioned like your original vision was much different from what you actually ended up with. So
Mhm.
I can see how that would build confidence in investors,
Mhm.
knowing that like a lot of the kinks are being worked out or have been worked out.
Exactly. And even in the pitch to them, we actually mentioned what we built in the past, and we learned that, showing them that you've learned ahead of time is
Mhm,
also huge, because then we can be like, yeah, we've built previous prototypes and we learned, yeah, they weren't going to work. And this is the new form factor that we see really having some good potential.
mhm.
For them, that's a really good, vote of confidence.
Uh,
Um,
let's see.
yeah.
Let's like another question is which of your two business models seems to be working more efficiently?
Mhm.
If you'd like to touch on
Yeah.
that.
So currently, the most popular option is the subscription model. Um, but we actually see the other, and this is more of assumptions, and you got to be careful with assumptions.
Mhm,
We actually see the one where we sell direct to cities is actually um, having the most potential in the future. The subscription option is a really good option for us to get off the ground early.
mhm,
Like obviously, we still need city approval, but now we're just providing it to the city with no cost to them.
mhm,
So it's an easier, lower barrier to entry way to get product out there.
mhm,
But for us, the sort of gold standard will be actually selling to cities, because then they're directly invested into micromobility.
mhm,
And then micromobility in those communities will have a better chance of success because the city is actually bought into the infrastructure, and then having proper infrastructure leads to better adoption. We actually see that as being the better alternative, although it does move a little bit slower because selling to cities
mhm,
is a little bit different than selling to a private ride share like a Bird or a Lime or a Spin or a Scoot. Uh,
mhm.
there are just some different hurdles, which is fine for when dealing with cities.
Yeah. Uh, that one's interesting because I thought that selling the cities would be like a prerequisite. to doing the subscription, just in order to get the things down on the pavement.
Yeah, I mean, we do get approval from them,
Mhm.
uh, but so I guess there's some, selling in that sense,
Yeah.
but actually, exchanging money for product, um, that doesn't really happen between us and cities. I mean, there are some cities that are actually getting ready to purchase,
Mhm.
but for us, that seems to be the better business model because now they install it, own it, operate, maintain it
Mhm.
under the commute or sort of commute brand, and then they can enforce that it is non-exclusive across all fronts. Because when we say it's non-exclusive to a large player, they obviously kind of laugh at us and they're like, "Huh, we're just not going to buy your product." So if a city did it, then it's really enforced, and then now it's kind of just has to happen.
Makes sense. And then last question here: what are some issues that are hardware specific that you'd initially overseen?
Um, so like I mentioned, everything takes 3 times longer and is much more expensive than you originally think.
Mm.
Other than that, they're just like minor things. Like for example, us switching materials uh, uh, from unfortunately we won't be targeting cars because you got the Tesla supercharger, but we are hoping to do some cool delivery robots and other things. So uh, unfortunately, no to the Tesla. Uh,
Car
but
goes back to the wheelchair, yeah.
yeah, we got wheelchairs. Uh, but I guess going back to hardware specific issues, um, it's basically now tweaking it for longevity of the product and quality, and as well as manufacturing efficiency and lowering cost on our end. Um, so while some might think, the jump from steel to aluminum is actually much more expensive. For us, we're seeing it, investing in the outer shell of the hub is more of an investment because now that hub will live on, or the shell will basically live on, as long as it doesn't get hit by a truck, that thing will pretty much live on forever because it's pretty darn, um, robust. Um, so, for us now we can just swap out the inside and it's basically a brand new hub. So it's hopefully like you buy the shell once and then now that thing lives on forever because it's so modular. You can upgrade it along the way. Um, so things like that. And then as well as, limiting the number of parts in the hub to, maybe use all the same part in some way. Like for us on the outside of the shell, we've made it to where I use the same bolt, washers, and nut on every bolt you see on the outside of the hub, which might sound okay. Does that actually save you any money? And actually saves us quite a bit of money because now we can buy those bolts and stuff in bulk, and then it brings down the price. On the inside, we've tried to standardize components across the board to duplicate parts because then you can order in bulk and you get discounts.
Mm.
So we're trying to make it as few parts as possible to make us, um, have a better cost. So then that way we can actually provide a cheaper or a less expensive product
Mm.
whoever's buying it. Because obviously the lower cost, the lower the barrier to entry is. So yeah, just little things like that are issues that we've seen. And then, I mean, there's probably going to be other issues, some other things that we're doing ahead of time is we actually just bought some vacuum forming machines. So we're going to be doing some enclosures around the electronics. So that way, bugs don't actually short out the electronics on the inside of the hub because bugs are bound to find their way into the thing.
That's a random problem.
Yeah, so there's little things like that we're trying to. I mean, you can only prepare so much for all these issues because it's out in the wild, and who knows what's going to happen to it. But we are trying to, think of the weird things that, ahead of time, so that way we don't have to deal with them once the hub is out and installed. Trying to think of other things. Other things that we're doing. We just bought an industrial 3D printer that'll be here in a few months. It's from, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Formlabs, but the Formlabs Fuse 1. Our sample parts actually get here today for testing, so we'll actually test out the different. It's a whole different process. So we're actually using a laser to melt nylon powder together or sinter the powder together. So it's called SLS printing.
Mm.
So selective laser sintering, to where you don't see any of the layers that you do on 3D printing, because we have had some complaints that customers say it looks kind of cheesy with those layer height little lines all up and down the, it's called a vehicle adapter, which goes on the scooter or bike.
Mm.
So we are taking steps to, one, it's going to be a much more, well, hopefully robust product,
Mm.
as well as, aesthetically it'll look a little bit better. But starting off with just a regular FDM style 3D printer with the spool of filament, heating up and getting spit out and drawing it,
Mm.
it's a really great start. And we're actually still using those on the inside of the hub. We'll just be using SLS or selective laser sintering for, like I said, what's called vehicle adapters, which go on the vehicle themselves.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising. You can use just like a almost like a hobbyist 3D printer and make like professional grade parts that go where people don't see.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I mean, even like I was telling you the other day, there's other weird little things that we're trying to do with these things called compliant mechanisms. And this is really getting into the technical stuff where you're basically using the elasticity of plastics as a spring. So that way we can actually replace the metal solenoid locks and actually lock the vehicle into place with 3D printed parts, entirely 3D printed parts, which is really interesting for us because now we can manufacture all of that in-house rather than having to source those parts and get them elsewhere. So there's and then there's also some other benefits to them where typically compliant mechanisms have just a ridiculous amount of cycle, I guess lifespan, where it's like you can do 1 million plus cycles on the thing and it'll still go. So
oh wow.
So we are trying to do some weird, different things to, one, we can manufacture more ourselves to control quality and durability. And then, we're just obviously always trying to experiment and, try new things.
That's great to hear. Do you have any closing remarks? I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up now.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess thank you everyone for joining. If you have any questions at all, my email is up here somewhere. And then also feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, either myself, so Peter Deppe, or follow Commute on LinkedIn. There we go. We post a lot of awesome stuff on there. We do have a Twitter and Instagram, but I guess to be honest, I don't really post too much there just because I'm focused on LinkedIn, because that's where we actually get most of our connections in business. So feel free to reach out to us, email, social media. I guess that's about it. And we are hiring for engineers. So if anyone out there is a CS, EE, or ME, we are looking for intern co-op positions. So
Well,
throw that out there.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
And then, yeah, if anybody's interested on like a little bit more like detailed look at like some of the topics that we touched on today with like pitching or validating like a business idea, we've got a couple like great presentations coming up today as well. One of them is by, like I mentioned before, like Zhao Ma. He's a venture capitalist, and he's the type of person that receives these pitches. And he's going to be giving a presentation on the broad general question of what do VCs look for. And so that will be pretty interesting. I think he has like a 60 slide the presentation. And then another one by Leora Euclea, who does data analysis, or she does UI and UX for Google's crisis response. And she's going to be talking about data-driven product validation. So if any of those sound interesting, take a look at our site. And yeah, Peter, I'm really glad that you could be here. Thank you so much for attending this event and helping out all of these people that are watching.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. And also shout out to our investors, Comeback Capital, Right Side Capital Management, and Phil Schultz for being awesome, and all of our friends, families, and supporters. So Appreciate everyone.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well,
Awesome.
awesome.
Thanks everyone for listening. Yeah, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of the speaking events.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Bye everyone.